Good afternoon. Welcome and thank you for joining us. For those that are watching and interested in getting an MBA from Salem State, my name is Mike Mitchell, and I'm the Associate Director of Alumni Relations here at the college. I'm thrilled to have you with us as we connect with several individuals who obtained their master's degree in business administration from Salem State and are now out in different areas of industry putting their skills to use. Before we get started, I'd like to take just a moment to introduce and thank our panelists who will join us today. Colonel Cheryl Lucier-Poppy has over 30 years of experience successfully leading and managing organizations of increasing complexity and responsibility. She currently serves as Senior Advisor for Veteran-Owned Business Development and Partnerships for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Supplier Diversity Office. And prior to her current role, Cheryl served as Secretary of the Department of Veterans Affairs for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts under the administration of Governor Charlie Baker, and previously to that, as the Superintendent of the Chelsea Soldiers Home. Her distinguished career has been in service to the veterans of our great nation, and we're honored to have her with us today. Barbara Baggs-Ramsey is currently the Director of Ophthalmology Business Planning at Massachusetts Eye and Ear. Barbara serves as operational leader for 7 ophthalmology satellite locations, overseeing more than 100 direct and indirect reports, including practice managers, program managers, operations coordinators, nurses, administrative and ophthalmic assistants, ophthalmic technicians, and interns, and is responsible for the daily delivery of those clinical services. Barbara is also a founding member of the Bertillon School of Business Alumni Network at Salem State and was the recipient of the 2019 George H. Ellison Volunteer of the Year Award. Dr. Deborah Lee Surface is currently Assistant Professor of Marketing in the Stillman School of Business at Seton Hall University in New Jersey. Recently credentialed with her PhD from UMass Lowell in the spring of 2023, Deb served as an adjunct professor in the respective colleges of business at UMass Lowell, UMass Dartmouth, and Salem State. Prior to her time in academia, Dr. Surface was enrolled in marketing and strategy with Cataldo Ambulance and St. Jean's Credit Union. In 2018, Dr. Surface was named a Rising Star Award recipient by the Salem State University Alumni Association and Foundation, and in 2023 completed her tenure as president of the organization after more than 10 years of service. Finally, Chris Gomez-Farewell is a double graduate of Salem State University's Bertillon School of Business and currently serves as the Executive Director of Beverly's Council on Aging and Community Center. Chris earned his undergraduate degree from the BSB in 2015 and his MBA in 2020. Prior to his time in Beverly, Chris served several years as the Director of Elder Services for the City of Lynn and remains a steadfast, civically engaged member of the community there. In the summer of 2023, Chris was named a fellow for the second North Shore cohort of LEADS, an economic and leadership development program that fundamentally changes the prospects of communities by investing in their civic infrastructure. I'd like to thank all of our panelists for joining us today and welcoming them to the show. Thank you all so much for joining us. And so we'll get right into our conversation. Our first question I'd like to ask for Cheryl and Barbara. As individuals who didn't major in a business-based undergraduate program, what was it about the Salem State MBA program that was of interest to you, and why did you decide to pursue your MBA?
Barbara, you want to go first?
Oh, sure. Thanks, Cheryl. And thank you, Mike, for those warm introductions. This is a great question. I think one of the reasons why I chose Salem State for my business degree was because I knew that I could come into the program and learn the terminology and skills that I didn't learn in undergrad by having a different focus in education. I felt very welcome within my classrooms and by professors, even though I didn't necessarily have, microeconomics and all that terms already under my belt. So it was a great experience to walk into.
And Cheryl, I'd ask for your thoughts on the same question.
Thank you, Mike. And for me, obviously, Salem State had a good value for the education. I did not have a business undergraduate degree. My undergrad was in elementary education. And due to my military service and raising my family, I actually never really taught school. It became evident that probably my master's degree would be best suited in the area of management, because then we would be experiencing the private sector versus the military. And the fact that I was able to actually attend Salem State without already having a business degree as an undergrad was extremely helpful. Obviously, there were a lot of foundational courses that we needed to take, but that was really one of the things. The plus, just being in the community that I live in was a really plus factor for me, to be in the same place with the same history of the Salem community, the birthplace of the National Guard, to be going to school there.
Thank you both. So Chris, my next question is for you as the kind of the only double BSB member on the call, so to speak. I'm curious as to what about your undergraduate education led you to want to also get your master's from Salem State as opposed to kind of pursuing maybe another school or opportunity?
Well, I had the firsthand experience on what a great school it was and how great the teachers were and the community and the value as well. When you compare to other schools, other state schools, Salem State's value is really great. And living in a nearby community, it was also convenient as well. And I just loved everything about Salem State, and it really attracted me to go for graduate school there as well.
So good undergraduate program led to a good graduate program. And here we are talking about it all today. So Deb, my next question is for you as somebody who kind of came from also, not necessarily a business background to start, obviously understanding kind of where your professional path brought you, but you actually studied art as an undergraduate student at Salem. And so as someone who kind of entered the business field from the art and creative space, kind of what made you want to make that transition from one industry to another? And now, as you find yourself in the next phase in your career as an educator at the collegiate level, what were some of the things you thought about as you were making those transitions?
Sure. So as an undergrad, I was an art major and marketing minor. So one of the unique experiences I had at Salem was the ability to explore kind of both sides of the spectrum. And after graduation, I did go into the business sector with that degree, as you said, Mike, on the creative side. So I took 10 years in between pursuing my undergrad into my graduate degree. So, like Chris, Salem State was the place I went because of my experience. And what was happening with me is because I didn't have, that perspective from, an education standpoint on the business side, that's why I went and pursued my MBA. And it allowed me to gain the experience I needed from the education standpoint. To pair with what I was doing from a practice perspective every day, working in industry. So that unique skill set that Salem provided me as an undergrad kind of translated into what I got at the MBA level, and then transitioning into, the approach that I took to pursue my PhD. Same thing kind of happened. During my MBA studies, my eyes were kind of open to the problems that I saw in business every day from a practical perspective, and gave me the ability to, see how I could contribute to solving some of those problems through research and mentorship and teaching. So that's just kind of a snippet of how that happened.
Great. Thank you, Deb. And so the first question that I'll put out to the group at large, some of you have touched on this a little bit, but there was some intentionality in bringing the four of you together today, in that you're all serving in different areas of practice and industry, either within or independent of, the healthcare field or things like that, or education or business. Again, there was some intentionality in that. And so the first question I'd like to throw out to the group at large is how did your MBA help prepare you for the role that you currently have? And anyone can feel free to jump in.
I'll jump in. I'm not shy. Everybody here knows I'm not shy. I think my answer is pretty easy. You can't pursue a PhD without kind of completing an MBA first. But for me, I teach MBA students now, and I actually got the opportunity to teach an MBA course at Salem. But it helps me be empathetic to the fact that, I was a full-time, individual working while I was pursuing my MBA, and it helps me be empathetic to my own students now, understanding that, there's a lot to juggle when you are a full-time, professional and studying for your MBA. Aside from all of the, the classes and the knowledge that I gained, but it also helped me become introspective and gain the skills to really understand, who I was as a person. And without doing my MBA, I would have never left industry and pursued my PhD. So there's a lot there, for me, definitely.
I think for myself, the MBA has helped me tremendously in my current role. As I manage over 15 staff and hundreds of volunteers. So just everything on interaction with volunteers and staff, budget reports, creating financial reports, forecasting. Even the marketing of the senior center and going after the target market and grant writing, everything. I feel like the MBA is such a well-rounded degree to go for, that it can help you in all aspects, like your personal life as well, balancing your checkbook and making a budget for yourself as well. So I think the MBA is so important and such a great program.
Thanks, Chris. Cheryl or Barbara, anything you want to offer?
I'll piggyback off of what Chris had to say. The education gave the foundation for the things that are needed. I mentioned it earlier, the terminology, the concepts, theories, gives you you learn those things, and then you have the ability to actually put them into action as part of your experiences. And within healthcare, there is a business aspect to it, but similar to what Chris is doing, you're providing a service to your community and to patients.
Oh, I think we lost Barbara for a moment there. Hang on one sec. Oh, there she is. Welcome back.
Oh, sorry. Which part did you miss? Where did I leave off?
Understanding that healthcare is a business and things like that.
Oh, okay, great. So as healthcare is a business, having the background, or having that foundation, understanding of business principles allows you to give better care to patients and to our community. And even as Chris said, personal life skills get built up as well with the foundational knowledge.
Thank you. And Cheryl, anything you'd like to offer?
Sure. And again, for me, it was, it just helped me obviously throughout the rest of my career, because I got my MBA back in 2000. I finished in 2001. So the operations experience, the finance, the budgeting, the human resources. My favorite course was entrepreneurship. Those all really helped everything that I did in state government. I think a lot of people would pursue a public administration degree, but business helped me tremendously. And I think also when you talked about the community that we're part of, I was probably the only military person in my class still on active duty, but there were people from, healthcare, all the public sectors, the nurse, there were nursing students there getting their MBA. I remember specifically, there was a physician who was there, and he said that getting his MBA helped him run his business better, help manage his people better, and understand, his clients. So I think we all got that business and leadership experience. And now that I'm in my new role, I've actually just coming out of a meeting with the Small Business Administration. I've kind of come full circle, where that entrepreneurship, being able to be seeing that on a daily basis again. So it's been really rewarding to me.
Thank you. And so now, as we've all touched on, sorry, I think I was just muted for a moment there. As we talk about areas that that you felt more prepared for and things like that through the obtaining of the degree, I'd like to pose, thinking back to your time in the program, so I'll pose the question in two ways. What was the most challenging or difficult part of the program? And then what was the most rewarding or enjoyable part of the program? And I think we've touched on a little bit of this, but kind of asking the question a little bit more directly. for anybody that wants to take it first.
I can take this one first. So I finished my MBA in 2013. I had started it in 08, and doing online education was not really a thing yet. So we were kind of dabbling with hybrid model classrooms, and there was not platforms such as this. And so I would actually say at the time, one of the most challenging things was trying to do in-person and remote learning. And now it seems like, 10 years later, fast forward, online learning is probably the most prevalent thing that is pursuing, but there's still value in that in-person interactions with classmates and meeting with professors. And so there's still a lot of value in that, but that was an interesting challenge that's probably not the same anymore.
Fair enough. Anybody else want to offer anything?
Yeah, I would say time management. I mean, I talked about it a little bit about being empathetic, but I think the biggest challenge was, time management, because, I took 3 years part-time, but I did take classes over the summer and just kind of went straight through, and working full-time and volunteering. I essentially in all of my free time lived on campus because I was, involved in a lot outside of my MBA. But I would say time management is the biggest challenge, because you kind of give up a lot of your free time and your life outside of work in order to pursue your degree. But the most rewarding piece, I think, is, you're working on something for yourself and for your own growth and your own, I mentioned this earlier too. You learn a lot about yourself throughout the process, and there are things that surprise you along the way. And at the end, it's very fulfilling, and it can change your life. I mean, it changed my life dramatically.
I think one of the things that I remember, Deb, was when we were talking about it, you were kind of in the thick of your program at one point, and I said, so give me an average day of an MBA student, and what's it like? You had said, well, I have my 9 to 5 that I'm currently doing. But in addition to that, I'm offering every kind of night and pretty significant amount of my weekends for the next 3 years while I finish this degree. And so understanding that commitment of time is enormous, and you really have to be willing to make it to pursue the degree kind of successfully.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it made me love it so much that I gave up another 4 years of my life right after.
Even heavier. Chris, any thoughts you want to offer?
Yeah, I agree with Deborah. I think the time component of it was my biggest challenge. I was working full time the whole time through grad school, and I had my 2 sons at the same time. So it was a really busy time, and time management was optimum, because I had to, every minute, on lunch breaks, I would study, or I'd be doing homework, or when the kids went to sleep. And yeah, it was difficult, but very much worth it. It was a sense of pride for myself. No one in my family had a graduate degree. So for me to be the first was something I'm very proud of. And it was well worth it, all the work.
And so, so obviously just, that, like I said, that time commitment, but understanding that on the back end, not only the professional success you can enjoy, but like Chris talked about is, you have that familial foundation to stand on and say, I was one of the first in my family to do this. And Chris, I know, like you mentioned, you're a dad to two young fellas, and they're going to look up and say, look, my dad's got a master's, that maybe that'll pursue them to go the route of Deb and say, well, I want to be the first doctor in my family. Do you know what I mean? So this kind of generational inspiration that can come from pursuing advanced learning and advanced degrees is paramount, I would say. So I think, we've talked about kind of the challenging and the rewarding pieces of the program. With the benefit of hindsight, I would put out to the group, if you could go back and change any decisions that you made, either about maybe the time you decided to take the degree, or kind of where you were in your life when it happened, or do you have anything that you think you would do differently if you were to pursue it again?
I can take that. I would have started sooner.
straight to the point, start sooner.
Because I think as you look back, you keep thinking, and I've heard everybody talk about family careers. You keep thinking, well, I'm going to wait until, my baby's born. I'm going to wait until my kids are in first grade. I'm going to wait until they're in middle school. And your life doesn't get easier. I think also in retrospect, I took one class a semester until the very last year, and then I doubled up. And then I did take all those winter sessions and intersessions and summer sessions because it was 57 credits since I didn't have the undergrad. I think starting sooner, not to make your life really difficult, but it doesn't get easier. So, the phrase to just jump in and do it, when you get the prerequisites, I think is important because it is so worthwhile and so valuable.
I would say be kinder to yourself because you're doing something that's really hard. And I think people who are, pushing themselves to do something that is this difficult are oftentimes trying to be perfect and want to be so successful that if things don't go as planned, they're 10 times harder on themselves and not as kind. It's okay to not be perfect. And it took me a lot longer to learn that than it should have. And so if I could go back, I think that's something that I, would have done differently.
I think one of the other things that the last few years has taught us, especially, as I think about kind of Deb, Cheryl, and Barbara, the spaces that you were working in, but also Chris, the space that you were working in. But Chris, you earned your degree kind of in the very early stages of the pandemic. And so not only are you in a space where you're dealing with the city's most vulnerable population and the elderly, but you're a dad to 2 young kids and you're trying to finish this degree at the same time. The last few years has taught us, to Deb's point, like, you have to make sure you're taking care of yourself before anybody else, because you can't be of effective service to anyone if you're not taking care of yourself in any way. So, great insight, Deb, for sure, to remember that, self-care is especially important nowadays. And so with that, I'd like to kind of transition into the next question. With knowing what you know now, and understanding that these, the 4 degrees that I'm speaking with today were all gotten at different stages of their lives, different times. Cheryl was in the early 2000s, Deb and Barbara kind of the middle to late teens, and then Chris just in the last couple of years. And you've all talked to some extent about the tangible benefit of the degree already, but what do you think the most beneficial piece of having this degree has been for you? I mean, is it the adaptability of what you've learned? Is it kind of just like, to Barbara and Cheryl's point about that foundational business structure that's been instilled? Is there any one thing that stands out to you as saying, I'm really glad I got this degree for this reason, or this is the one thing that I'm most happy with?
I'll start with this, is that it allowed also connections, and networking and how to network. You don't get anywhere by yourself. There's always going to be someone that is going to need to give you a hand, and you have to turn around and give a hand back to someone else when the time is right. But that is probably the most valuable thing, is the connections and the relationships that came out of doing this program.
As one of my old professors used to say, networking, networking, networking. Anybody else want to add anything about your what you think to be the most beneficial part of the degree that you've earned?
I mean, I would agree with Barbara. You learn a lot about the tangible things that you can, put into practice every day. But I think the intangibles like networking, but also the support system that you gain, it gave me the ability to completely Mike was there. Mike kind of watched it happen. I walked away from like my planned out successful life, and without the confidence and support system of the people I met during my MBA, I would have never been able to do that, because it gave me the ability to kind of say, all right, I'm ready to do this. I have the skills, I have the network, and the people behind me to, believe in me to just, walk away from my career and start something new. So I think those intangibles are, what the MBA gave me.
Thanks, Deb. Anybody else want to offer anything? No? All right.
Sure, I'll add that I
Excellent.
think we talked about you talked about the networking, and obviously you see the network of Salem State everywhere you go. You find Salem State graduates, whether they're undergrads or MBA or nursing students or one of the other programs everywhere. Matter of fact, one of your small business development center people was just out here at this other college here today. But I think the opportunity to come full circle, when I talked about the entrepreneurship being my favorite class, that and business ethics, it was kind of a toss up. To now be at that same end again and seeing working with the Small Business Development Center, you can see how things come around. And the idea of lifelong learning, I think, is really important. I think I did say I took a long time to get my master's, but I think my family realized that you can continue to learn at every age. And that's something we take with us. And here we are, all different times that we got our degrees back here talking about how wonderful it was to get our MBAs at Salem State.
And so with that, I'd like to transition to our last question for this afternoon. Again, as Cheryl mentioned, in identifying that the four of you got your master's degrees all at different times, but identifying that there's a transferability that's timeless in what you've learned. For someone who, say, Cheryl, you're out at an event, or Deb, you're talking to a future student, or Barbara, a colleague, or Chris, a colleague, and they're saying, hey, I've been thinking about an MBA from Salem State. What advice would you give to that person that's considering this MBA degree from Salem State?
I would tell them it's an amazing campus. The teachers are so great and very accessible. And, I think the school as a whole, they really understand that, if the working adults and you're working, you're going to school, and they're able to accommodate this. And it's just a great experience. Everyone's great and willing to help, and you get a real bang for your buck, so to speak, compared to other state universities. And if you live in the North Shore, it's great because it's nearby as well.
Anybody else?
I don't want to sound like the Nike commercial, but as they would say, just do it. To me, it was the best value. I looked at several programs. Obviously, some were shorter, more expensive. Some had a different focus, more on maybe international business, but they were so far away, and also living in Salem, to go to a class that ends at 9:30 at night, you're not taking another hour to come home. And I look at the professors we had. I still think of them to this day, and I get to see some of them to this day. They were really wonderful. So the faculty, the community, I would just encourage anyone to take advantage of it.
Yeah, I would second that, to just do it. But whatever challenge that you think is in the way of you getting this degree, there's someone at Salem State that can help you overcome that challenge if you're willing to put in that work. It is attainable, and as Chris said, at a good price, and it's close by, and you can do it if you're willing to do the work.
I would agree with all of that. And I would say what I would do is tell them if they'd like to have a cup of coffee, I will bring them personally to Nazreen, because that's the touch that Salem State has. You're able to go back. You're able to, stay in touch. I had a class with Chris at the end of my journey, and I've done work with Barbara. I mean, there's always a connection in some way. and we all know each other. It's a smaller campus, a smaller program where you are able to, meet people, stay in touch with people, and have that personal connection.
And I would assume I'm going to offer this without having posed this question to the four of you previously, but as four people who are pretty active and involved on a place like LinkedIn, that if people are watching and they want to connect with you to maybe learn more, that you'd be receptive to that connection. But to Cheryl's point too, the other thing that I would mention as well is that you don't know how big the network is unless you're kind of in the thick of it. And so when I met Chris probably a month or so ago, we sat down for a coffee and started ping pong balling all these names that we realized we knew, these common connections who were, some of them were from, his time in the MBA program, some were from his work that he's doing in the city of Lynn. And the work that I do here at the university and learning and getting to meet people like Cheryl and Deb and Barbara and Chris is that Salem State's network is massive. I mean, it's 73,000 graduates, and we have another probably 20,000 friends of the institution who are all willing to help students meet their moment, make those connections, and unlock those doors of opportunity for people. And so for those that may be watching, thinking about the degree, as Cheryl said, be like Nike and just do it. Visit salemstate.edu to learn more, make a phone call to the business school and say, hey, I'm thinking about this. Get your admissions application underway, and then join our network of alumni, because we are far reaching. We are doing great things. And the last thing that I'll add to that, all of you missed, that I'm going to just like stick the feather in my cap on this one, that our business school is accredited by the AACSB, which is one of, I think the new number is either 5 or 6% of business schools internationally obtain this accreditation. 5%, thank you. We are the only public college in Massachusetts to have this designation. And so we are right up there with the most competitive business schools in the world. And so make the investment in yourself. Come join our campus. Come see our school. We've got 4 shining examples of what a Bertillon School of Business MBA degree can do from Salem State. I'd like to thank our panelists for joining us. And before we sign off, I would just like to put it back to the group to say, if there are any closing thoughts, please feel free to offer them.
Go Vikings.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Go Vikings.
Well, thank you so much, everybody, for your time. I love doing these kind of brown bag lunch seminars where people can learn more in a pretty casual setting. So in the text of the post afterwards, we'll share some additional links out to the master's website for the MBA program, the Bertillon School of Business. And again, our 4 panelists today, thank you so much. Find them on LinkedIn, connect with them on LinkedIn, 4 very different areas of expertise and backgrounds. And again, we'd just like to offer one more thank you all for joining us today. And
Thank
with
you.
that,
Thank
we
you.
will close our
Thank you.
program. And everybody be well, and happy holidays to you all.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.